No mai, haere mai, piki mai, ka kia mai, kia ora e tiwi, and welcome to 30 with me, Guyon Espiner. We do 30 minutes with one guest and no cuts, so what we record is what you get. Sam Neill. He's been named a living icon by Rolling Stone magazine. He's starred in great New Zealand films like Sleeping Dogs, The Piano, Hunt for the Wilder People, right through to the big Hollywood blockbusters like Jurassic Park. In 2022, though, there was an unwanted plot twist. He was diagnosed with blood cancer and he didn't respond to early chemo treatment. But he was switched to a modern cancer drug and he's been in remission and he's been back at work. In 2023, he won a Silver Logie for Most Popular Actor in courtroom drama The 12. So what's it been like to live this wild ride and what's next? I visited him at his Two Paddocks vineyard in central Otago to find out. So let's start the clock. 30 minutes with Sam Neill. Well, great to see you, Sam Neill, and great to see you looking so well. Have you've beaten back the cancer. You had a pretty nasty brush there.
Look, I don't think you ever actually beat things, but I'm in remission, which means so far so good. You're never entirely sure about what happens next, and there's no guarantees. But it does sharpen your appreciation of life, and I have to say, I can't remember a time when I've been happier to wake up every day and enjoy every day as it comes.
And you're happy back and working hard, the courtroom drama The 12 and other projects as well, so you're really back full on into it.
Yeah, well, I've always been a bit of a work addict, I think. And because I think of myself as actually one of the laziest people on the planet. I'm so lazy, but that doesn't stop me kind of getting sort of panicky and thinking, where's my next job? You know, there's something that afflicts actors. And I've known actors younger than me and older than me that have this absolutely the same affliction. You think, when's the next job? I need to be working. Because there's also not really a job, it's something you really enjoy. So last year I did 2 series. I did one for Netflix. It was called Untamed, and that comes out later this year. Eric Bana stars in it, and I'm on drums. And the second one was the 3rd series of The 12, in which I play this, big mouth barrister. This time I had a few Kiwis to work with, including Sir Ian Mune. It was wonderful to work with him again. The last time was in 1977 on Sleeping Dogs. And Marlon Williams, who plays my son. And again, I was on drums and he was on vocals.
And you've also published your memoir, Did I Ever Tell You This? And you confront your cancer there, and there's some rich and amusing stories of your acting life. Had you always wanted to write a memoir, or was this Sam Neill confronting mortality?
I had never meant to write a memoir. This was, I started doing chemo and I just had to stay home. I was very sick with the chemo. The cancer wasn't making me sick, it was chemo, that's one of the, but I had to stay home in my flat in Sydney. I had nothing better to do, and I thought, let's write. The other thing about chemo is that they, in order to sort of stomach it at all, they give you steroids, so you can hardly sleep. So I was kind of like, I would want to go to it. So I would write as something to do. And it became very sort of therapeutic in a way, because I would go to bed, wouldn't be able to get to sleep, and I'd think, what shall I write about tomorrow? So I didn't start at the beginning or at the end. I never meant it to be a book. It just sort of turned out that way. But I thought I should write down stories of my life for my kids, because I wasn't sure how long I had to live, and I thought it might be interesting to them one day, possibly not, but I'll write it down anyway. And then when I got to about 80,000 words, I rang a friend who's a writer and said, how many words do you need for a book? And they said, well, probably 100,000, 120. I said, well, I'm up to 80. What do you think? And he said, you've got to write a book. So then I sort of filled in other bits of my life and it became this book. And to my complete surprise, it sold very well. And I thought, God, it's going to be so embarrassing to go into a bookshop and there I am in the remainders pile, you know. $3.
One of the things that struck me reading your book is that you never trained as an actor. I mean, you must have done 100 movies. You've worked with everyone from Meryl Streep to Sean Connery to Steven Spielberg. What, you just wandered into it? You never trained?
I did sort of wander into it. And, you know, one of the things that occurred to me while I was writing the book was it's the people who say no to you that count as much as the people who want you to do things. And so, for instance, I wanted your job at one point, you know. I thought, what kind of, maybe I should be a reporter, maybe I should be a journalist, you know. Actually, it was a good thing that I got turned down by TVNZ twice.
To be a news reporter, right?
Yeah. And also as an editor, they didn't want a bar of me, and so they sort of saved me in a way.
Didn't you once star in a movie called The Journalist, which Wikipedia says is one of the worst Australian movies ever made?
Yes. Look, you can't expect to be in a hit every time you make a film, and it's always a compliment to be asked to be in a movie, and I was probably a little less choosy about what I decided to do in the early days.
Yeah. So you joined the National Film Unit. Yeah. You were sort of director there, but then your big break comes with Sleeping Dogs, which is a phenomenal movie based on the C.K. Stead book. But you wouldn't have even hit 30 at that point, would you?
No, I was close to 30. Yeah. So that was the first time. And having done Sleeping Dogs, I went to Australia and I was asked to do a film called My Brilliant Career, and that was, and I think already I was 30 or 31 by then, and I thought, actually, I think I could make a living as an actor. It was something that was incomprehensible. You know, you couldn't imagine that when I was growing up. There was no Toi Whakaari. You couldn't train as an actor. Most of the work was on radio drama, and no one seemed to like my voice there. So I did work for the National Film Unit, making documentaries for some 7 years. But I was doing, like most government, it was a branch of the New Zealand government, tourism publicity, they never had enough money. So you would go away and make a documentary, and instead of overtime, they would pay you in time off. So I would get blocks of time off, and I would do little films. I would act in little films with my friends, or I'd do a play. And then Roger Donaldson had seen me in one of these little films, and he said, "I think that's the guy we want." So Roger and Ian called me, and suddenly I find myself as the lead in a film. We're in Coromandel, where the only other industry seemed to be growing marijuana, and I didn't have no idea what I was doing. No, you know, we hadn't made a film in New Zealand for 17 years. No one knew what we were doing, but it turned out all right.
It stacks up all right. I've watched it recently myself. You can find it on TVNZ Plus nowadays.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And then you've worked in some huge, iconic New Zealand movies. Obviously, The Piano would have been about 1993, an iconic New Zealand movie. How important is that movie to you?
Oh, that was very important, and because it was a major work. It was a major work of cinema, and it was coming out of this country, and it was feted everywhere, and it got Oscars and so on. I didn't get one, but a lot of other people got Oscars for it, including Jane. I think it's an extraordinary film, and I did watch Sleeping Dogs the other day, and I was thinking of Hunt for the Wilder People, and there's a lot of bashing around at bush in all these films. And bearded, and, you know, looking pretty wild. You'll see that I've trimmed my beard for this, because I was looking a bit like a bushman myself before you turned up.
Thank you for that. And then, of course, not long after The Piano, you really exploded internationally with Jurassic Park. How incredible to work with Steven Spielberg on one of the biggest movies of all time.
Yes, it was a great privilege to work with Steven. I mean, he's a phenomenon. But I had done films internationally prior to that, and a lot of people seem to remember me playing the Antichrist.
In the Omen movies?
Yeah, and And there were films like Dead Calm and so on, which had got a good international audience.
That launched Nicole Kidman, didn't
Yes.
it? And so he'd seen you in that.
Yes, that's why Stephen wanted me for the dinosaur film. And it was really fun to do that. And I became very good friends with Jeff and Laura Dern. We went through a hurricane together and survived.
Off Hawaii or something?
That really binds people.
A near-death experience.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it was. We were lucky we didn't have a tidal surge because we were all stuck in one big room in the ballroom of this resort on Kauai, and there was it went through so fast there was no tidal surge. But had it been a slow one, I think we would have all died. It was a pretty serious matter. I think the wind speeds were 210 miles an hour, something like that.
And how much did that movie change your career and change your life?
I don't think a great deal, as a matter of fact. I just kept pottering along, and some years are better than others. But no, it didn't. It sort of didn't turn me into Tom Cruise or something.
No, you've sort of resisted that. In fact, you say that you can go out to Starbucks and not get hassled. You don't see yourself as a celebrity, do you?
I'm not a celebrity, and
you make quite a distinction. You think that that's almost a separate job in your brain, isn't it?
It is. It's actually a serious job which I've never. I don't have a publicist. I don't do any of those things that you need to be a celebrity. I do a little bit of social media. That's just for fun, but it's not.
These are usually farm animals and things.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I do silly things just to make people smile a bit because.
So you've never chased the fame, though, have you?
No, I'm not interested in fame, but I'm well enough known to get work. I think, again, it's been a sort of happy accident that my life is balanced. I'm well enough known to get a decent amount of work, and good work. So I'm not totally obscure, but at the same time, I can go into Queenstown and be unbothered. Now, Brad Pitt is up the road at the moment. I feel sorry for him because everyone wants to see Brad. And I know when he walks down the main street in Narrowtown, he will be mobbed. No one gives a stuff if I'm there. It's great.
You wouldn't trade places. You never moved to Hollywood, did you?
No, I didn't. I did for a year and a half, I think. We rented a house up the top of the hills. And it was beautiful. But it was also, I'm glad we went there, but just after we left, they had the earthquakes and there were riots, we could see fires on the other side of town. It's a very sort of, it's not a happy place, America, and I wasn't happy there. I'm interested in the condition of America now. I mean, it's beggars belief what's happening there now, but you sort of understand it. I was playing, of all things, at one point, Thomas Jefferson, who believed in the Constitution. He was a good president in that sense. And I was in West Virginia, and this is 25 years ago. And the director, Charlie Hayde, he said to me, "America is finished." I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "Look around you. Do you see anyone that's happy here?" And I said, "Well, no, not really." He said, "Let me show you why." And we drove down the main street of this beautiful little town, beautiful, and picture postcard perfect. The main street was all boarded up. He said, "Look at that, there's nothing open here. There's no barber, there's no bar, there's nothing. No one goes to this church, And he said, this is what life's become in North America. Everyone goes to the mall. Everyone is in their pickup trucks and they buy fast food and that's how they live and no one talks to one another. It's miserable. So when you hear a slogan like, "Make America Great Again," it makes a sort of weird sense because America could be great again, but at community level, not with sort of strange billionaires making weird decisions, but actually, I think America, its heyday was probably in the 1950s, when there was still community, when the barber was still open. And if America, and people drove great cars with fins, and there was jazz in Harlem, and what a wonderful place it was. And perhaps I'm just sort of fantasizing, but that's how I see it. I think it was a great time in America, but it's a terrible time now. And you could sort of sense that. When I was living in the Hollywood Hills, I thought, I don't see the point of this. I don't see the point of this country. And also, there's something about LA and Hollywood in particular, where all anyone is interested in is show business. And show business doesn't interest me. I love movies, but show business, the business side of it, is for no interest. I don't care what the box office is this week. I don't give a stuff which platform is performing. It's not interesting to me, but the product is interesting. And I think when Americans make good films, they're great. But there's a lot of indifferent stuff around there now because it's so driven by money. And money's not a good thing when it comes to the arts.
You describe yourself in the book as a rusted on lefty. Is that you?
Well, I suppose I am. Look, I like to think I'm a progressive. I don't know how progress became a bad word. I would have thought progress means you're going forward, you're making things better. And that's become very sort of unfashionable. I don't know why that is, because I think progressive is as good a thing as you could possibly want to be. And I certainly think of myself in that way. I'd like to see, I think compared to my childhood, there's such inequity around, for instance. There's such a division between the wealthy and the poor.
That you didn't see growing up.
It didn't exist in New Zealand.
In the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, so the parts of New Zealand that are the most under pressure in terms of poverty were really flourishing in those days. There were meat works, there were sharing gangs, people were productive, they had jobs, and that disparity of income didn't exist. So on the street where we lived, there was a plumber 3 doors down, and he had a much better boat than my dad, who was sort of middle class and was he was the CEO of our little family firm. He had a much better boat than us. At least we had a little putt-putt, but it was that disparity did not exist.
You write in the book that you were still in mourning for former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. You were quite shaken. I get the sense you were quite shaken by the vitriol that she experienced, particularly in the COVID times. A lot of the online bullying and threats that were made against her.
I think that's completely shameful. I give thanks for Jacinda Ardern. I think she was a great Prime Minister, and she showed a wonderful leadership through those times. The Guardian, for instance, estimates that 35,000 lives were saved in New Zealand because of government policy. And this place opened up before anyone. I was amazed. I was doing a job in tight lockdown in England, and I came back and I went into, what's it called when you're locked up in a hotel?
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Actually, I really enjoyed being in quarantine. It was really nice. It was so quiet. But I was amazed that I had a little balcony. That helped too when quarantine helped a great deal. But I got on my balcony and people were partying up and down the streets in Auckland. That wasn't happening anywhere in the world. So this idea that New Zealand was oppressed like nowhere else, it's absolute bullshit, that actually this place opened up long before anywhere else. But no, I think Jacinda Ardern she showed wonderful leadership through that. She showed it after the Christchurch mosque, and she was and is intelligent and empathetic, all the things that I want a Prime Minister to be. And I tell you what, my 2 favourite Prime Ministers are her and Helen Clark, 2 great women. And I think if I had my way, I'd have women running everything now. I'd certainly, look, you think of all the places that are in trouble at the moment. Sudan, the Ukraine, the United States of America, and the Middle East, of course. Who's in charge in these places? Toxic males, toxic masculinity is everywhere. Now, that Ukraine war would never have happened if Putin was actually Mrs. Putin. I think we should stop men being in charge of stuff, certainly politics.
Well, it's an interesting script idea, possibly.
Yeah.
You wrote and presented a documentary called Cinema of Unease, which came to sort of really underline and underscore this sort of theme and the wider of the New Zealand film environment at the time. How would you assess the health of the industry now in New Zealand?
Oh, look, I think we're doing some really good things, and I'm really looking forward. There's a film called Tina, which I'm busting to see. It hasn't come here yet, but things take a while to get down to Central Otago. But I really want to see that. I loved Rachel's film about the mountain. That was great. Yeah, it's great. It's so important for a culture to be telling our own stories, whether it's in the visual arts, whether it's in films, whether it's in television. We need to tell our own stories. After the Party was a great. That was as good a bit of television that from anywhere last year. It's amazing. So I think we're in pretty good nick in that sense. But of course, there's always room for more. And one of the sort of ironies about filmmaking is it's easy to get money up for your first film, relatively easy. For your second film, it's almost impossible. Yeah, look, the arts in general, I think one of the things to be regretted is that now the humanities are so devalued now, and in university, not just the humanities but the arts as well, because we live in a increasingly sort of utilitarian society, and people say, "What use are the arts?" You know, well, what use is a country without the arts? It's the arts that give us a reason to live, you know, the arts that show us who we are. The humanities, you know, my brother was in the English department at Auckland University. When he was teaching there were something like 34 people teaching English. That's to say, educating people in the English department. Now it's reduced to exactly 4 people. That's a completely shocking statistic to me, but it shows how money has become, you know, so education has become devalued in this country, whereas qualifications are everything. If you're not going to university to get a qualification, now that's different from an education. So I think qualifications are fine, but get an education first. And an education includes the humanities, whether it's another language or whether it's philosophy or whether it's history. History is the one subject that I think should be compulsory at school. People have no sense of history. Do you know, the stuff that we went through in the 20th century, it beggars belief when you think there were 2 world wars. Who were they started by? Toxic males. You know, who would have imagined that little corporal from Munich could have started that stuff? Nearly 50 million people died in that war because of that one toxic male. I can think of a few more toxic males that are in charge of things at the moment. Things that you would have thought impossible in 1933 became true. Anything is possible now in this climate, isn't it?
Are these the sorts of lessons that cinema has a role in amplifying too, or do you see it largely as an entertainment sphere?
Well, you know, Sleeping Dogs turned out to be weirdly prescient. I hope that the Godzilla films aren't prescient, but you know, who knows what's around the corner? And if it wasn't so alarming, a lot of what's happening today would be.
You probably wouldn't believe the script if you were handed one, would you? For
No,
Trump
you wouldn't.
2.0,
You wouldn't.
Would you?
But I don't know what the ending is. I don't know where this goes. Nobody does. Pages 80 to 110 haven't been written yet.
This is a good place where we are today at Two Paddocks. A good place to get away from a pretty wild world.
Yes, this is my sort of refuge as much as anything. It's a very quiet green spot, and it's a project that I've been working at for 25 years. All these native trees behind you, for instance, that's one of the things that we do here. I plant them not just for me, but for the birds. And, you know, there was never a native bird to be found in this valley before these trees start to come.
They're coming back.
So normally, not today, but normally there's one or two bellbirds and a few tuis and so on floating around. And I think it's largely to do with, you know, we plant corridors for the birds. All our riparian things are planted in natives. There's lots of things that we do here. We mostly, of course, the project is about growing wine and organic wines. And I'm.
Does that financially support you, or do you financially support it?
It's neutral.
Right. Okay.
There's no money in wine.
Yeah.
But having said that, Two Paddocks has become this very recognised and I think successful brand around the world. And at such times as I shuffle off, I'd like to think that's my legacy as much as anything.
Isn't it fascinating comprehending and contemplating the passage of time? I mean, I was just thinking of you rewatching Sleeping Dogs. You're a beautiful young man at that point. You're still a pretty good-looking man today. But you must have been, 29 or so. Must have been incredible watching a nearly 50 years younger self.
Yes, I mean, that's a weird sort of opportunity, isn't it? To see yourself living and breathing and grinning like a fool, and what a skinny little bloke I was. And I can tell I can tell a couple of things watching that young fella, that he doesn't really know what he's doing, but when he gets it right, it may be, he may sort of, there may be something in his brain that's going, yeah, I think that was the way to do it. But he doesn't always get it right. I think I get it right more often now. I'm an untrained actor, but I've learnt on the job.
I think it was Dennis Potter who said you were the most underrated actor of all time. But then Meryl Streep said you were the best kisser that she'd worked with. Which is the better compliment?
I'll take both.
Yeah.
I'll take both. Yes, Meryl was being very sweet about that. Of course, nowadays we have intimacy coordinators that tell you exactly how to do that.
Not in your day.
Not in my day, no. Actually, we did have one briefly. I was working with Annette Benning on Apples Never Fall, and we had an intimacy coordinator who came on the set and said, and it was just for a kiss scene, you know, it wasn't even rumpy in bed. It was just, we just had to kiss in my study. And she suggested this and that. And halfway through the talk we were being given, Annette said, listen, honey, I think we're going to be fine, okay? We're going to be fine. She said, okay. And we never saw her again. We got on with the kiss, we were fine.
How much did it mean to you to write the book and dealing with that cancer at the time? I mean, does it mean that you're not afraid of dying now?
No, I've got no fear of dying, but at all, you know. And I know people for whom this is a great fear, but it doesn't worry me at all. I just want to live longer because life's good, and I feel very blessed with the life I've had. I've sort of brambled between things, just sort of muddled along, but most of it's been a great pleasure.
You've never had a 5-year plan?
A plan? I can't think of the only thing. I get up in the morning. The only thing I know I need to do is I need to have a coffee about between 10 and 10:30. Other than that, you know, I make sort of promises to myself. I will go to the gym today. I don't always keep them, but I know that I will enjoy the day, and I don't take anything for granted anymore.
And what's next for you?
Well, I think I'm going to do a film on the Gold Coast just for a few days in April. It's nearly April now, isn't it? It's coming up pretty soon, just to keep my hand in. And, there are bills to pay.
Yeah. As long as there's no planning, right?
No planning.
And coffee.
Yeah.
And wine.
And wine, and I think, there's a lot of talk about how alcohol is bad for you these days, but wine, I think, we've been producing wine for thousands of years, and that's for a very good reason, because it's very good for you, and it's very good for conversation, it's very good for conviviality, it's good for community. These are the things that people who are against alcohol have forgotten. Christ's first miracle was he turned water into the wine. He didn't turn it into no alcohol wine. He didn't turn it into vodka. He didn't make cocktails for people. He turned it into good wine. We know it's good wine because the host of that wedding, and the wedding would have been a dud if he hadn't done that. And his mother told him, do something about that, son. And that was the miracle that he came up with.
So you're following in those footsteps as a
Well,
winemaker?
every good bottle of wine is a miracle in a sense, but I'm not Jesus.
You're Sam Neill. Sam fucking Neill.
Thanks, Guy.
Thanks very much. That was 30 minutes with Sam Neill. That's 30 with me, Guyon Espiner. We'll catch you next time.